much nicer time. We have a few people that are going to be out absent, then we'll do the roll call. I got calls from both Angela Dennis and from Sean Byers. They're both out with some family activities they had to take care of this evening. So, with that being said, call this meeting to order. We will do a roll call first. I'm John. Bilyeu.
John Simonich. Jerry Hall.
Greetings, John.
Josh Luliak.
Go.
Tell them who you are.
Who are you?
Who are you?
Just say your name.
Good job, Margaret. Margaret doesn't have a hearing, so we need to make sure that she's.
Speak up. Okay. Rest of the gallery would go ahead and. Welcome. Is there somebody back in the corner?
Fernando Gabriel, Deputy City Clerk.
Thank you again all for joining us. Tonight, there's a lot of activities going on, so we're going to do the flag salute next. John, would you mind leading that?
Okay, hello. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Thank you, John. So we have, we will be having a shorter meeting tonight. There's been some changes in the planning of it. Usually we have a budget to consider for the next year. The budget's been postponed by the city due to all the flooding issues and things they've had and all the planning that was going on. So we'll talk more about that at the end of the meeting. So this will look more like a typical quarterly meeting. So with that being said, are there any oral communications? Under scheduled matters, we are, again, short a couple of people tonight, so we will postpone one more time the reorganization of the committee members and the subcommittee, but we will do that to coincide with the change in the fiscal year. Approval of the draft minutes. February 16th. Has everybody had a chance to review those? If you have, is there a motion to approve them?
There's correction, at least one correction needs to be made.
Go ahead.
Before we have a new member. Yeah. Would John Sulier please stand up?
My name is misspelled. My first name is misspelled.
Okay.
Every single time.
And
Roll call to every vote.
can you correct that?
Yeah, we'll make the noted changes and then correct it on our end.
Okay.
Josh.
Do you
If
have,
you'd like to make a motion with the amendment,
do
And I make a motion to approve
And I'll second that.
as amended.
do you have the proper spelling?
we do.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Passes. The next item, again, we'll do this as we've done in the past. We will combine measures H and measure I together. And as we do the reviews on these, the first one will be police, and that will be Jerry Hall.
Chief Costello and I spoke on the phone. Is that today? That was today. Yesterday was a very long day, so this one's still getting started for me. There was only, once again, in reviewing the report, I find that not only our police department, our fire department, but the other departments as well are excellent stewards of the money that we are responsible for overlooking to make sure it's being properly deployed. There was a couple of things that Chief Costello pointed out that he found himself, and the easiest way is to have him bring them up.
Chief? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. So some of the things I talked to Mr. Hall about this morning when we discussed the Measure H and I quarterly expenditure report, there's always a few things that pop up that are new to me, and then also some things that I see that could be potentially irregular, like our vehicle maintenance account jumped up quite a bit, so staff and I inquire on these things. And we find out that we had some major repairs on some Measure H vehicles during this quarter, which is why the account in that certain area in the month 2 of this quarter jumped up. And then there's just little small expenditures that were new, not very much. A couple were like $7, $584, which were either new subscriptions in Measure H and I, and also new systems like Nearmap, and it's just how some of these entries are made into our encode. I have to go through and highlight and make sure that I know what they are as their ongoing expenditures. So that's really all. I also can give the committee an update on just some of the police activities. Obviously, we know during the month of March, we had a lot of flooding. Flood fight was conducted by all of city staff. We had our Emergency Operations Center fully operational for several weeks during that time, where we spent many hours in there as a team with the flood and the flood fight. There was additional things that we noted that the police department and the fire department and city works needed during that time. One of the things that we identified was our drone unit couldn't fly during high winds and rain due to the platforms we had. We did immediate research during the flood fight, and we obtained a new drone, new technology that is capable of flying in high winds and rain. One of the other things that I saw during this quarter is our staffing levels. Staffing levels have increased. We've hired 2 police officer trainees and 1 part-time animal control officer. All of these employees grew up and live, and their family live in the Porterville area, which is great for us. We have 5 persons in various stages of hiring process, both for police officer, police trainee, community service officer, animal control officer, and out of the 5 that are in the stages of hiring, 4 are from Porterville, and their families are from Porterville. We also hired an emergency communication dispatcher. This was a Measure I dispatcher, and his family and himself live in Porterville. Again, some of these positions wouldn't be possible, and some of the public safety concerns we had during the flood fight wouldn't have been possible without H and I tax measures. So I'm available to answer any questions that the committee has.
One thing we discussed on our phone call, and it's not involving Measures H and I, but I think it's something that we are concerned with, and that was regarding our discussion about the current use of the armory.
Yeah, and I don't know if the city manager wants to talk about that, but we do have the armory open as an evacuation point still at this point, because the river is still off limits. It's still dangerous. We have emergency evacuation orders still along the Tule River for safety concerns as city works makes progress in securing the banks of that river. We had a lot of erosion. Mike might be able to talk a little bit better on the extent of it, but as we went through the flood fight process, we probably lost anywhere between 40 and 50 or more feet on both sides of the river as the water came down. The armory is open. It's open from 8 o'clock at night to 8 o'clock in the morning for people that have been displaced because of the flood fight and the flood.
Is that usually pretty full every night?
We're averaging anywhere between 10 and 15 a night.
And what's the capacity?
100 and,
Careful, the chief, fire's right behind you.
50 cots.
50 cots, okay.
I know at one time it was up, when Green Cross said there was up in the hundreds, and as we took over, there was some transitions.
I had a follow-up question from last year on something that was implemented, I believe it was with either Measure H or I funding, and you brought in a predictive police officer.
We have a crime analyst, she has been hired, yes.
Has there been enough time to see if that is a viable job?
It's been about 6 months since she went into that position, and she's doing dual roles at this point, but she has developed several different programs. She's in an internship with Visalia Police Department's crime analyst, which she does for a few hours every Wednesday. We've created different technological systems within our own PD with the system that we currently have with Spillman Motorola. We're able to see hot spots. We're able to develop different areas of concern throughout the city to deploy resources. And she's also helped our investigation units on several major cases, including a recent homicide case that ultimately ended in several arrests.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions for the chief?
I did have one, I guess it's more clerical and probably doesn't have anything that you'd have control over ultimately. You made the statement about noticing a spike in maintenance costs, specifically because you had a fistful of Measure H equipment that needed maintenance. Is there any way that that can actually be differentiated inside that file so that we can see it? That way we don't have to worry about like where did this come from and we have to hunt it down?
Yeah, that would be something I could work on with Maria, but it's limited entry.
Of course.
Into our system. I know which units those are, and if those come up and I see those spikes and we're in these quarterly meetings, I write them down in my notes as I highlight them as I go over with Mr. Hall, so I know which units those are, and then also we can tell our fuel increases obviously went up due to price, so we're
Right.
able to note those areas, and I can bring those up during the meeting.
Great. That's all I wanted to ask. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, chief.
Okay, how's the new dog doing?
We did it in August.
Oh, you get it in August, okay. Oh, okay. Thank you. I might need it.
I can find a couple cow dogs.
Yeah.
Next, I would like to move on to fire. John? No? Sean, I'm sorry, that's right. Excuse me.
That's a surprise.
It's
Voted me in something again, huh?
it's a field promotion.
That's John Dyer.
So, and Sean is out, so if the fire chief would step up, give the report.
Thank you, committee members. I spoke with Sean yesterday. I did ask him to follow up with you about some concerns that we had. Did he give a briefing to you about the conversation that we had?
Very brief.
Okay, so I'll go over the conversation that we had, kind of the highlights,
Okay.
and I'll open it up for questions. So Sean and I spoke about just as the police chief did with the flood fight that we experienced in March, and which has ultimately delayed our budget and pushed back up the meeting. Some of the highlights and the things we experienced, I entered into unified command with Tulare County's Type 3 team, which a Type 3 team is able to handle small local emergencies at a county level. We quickly realized that with the magnitude of this incident, that we were going to have to expand our command capabilities, which then at that point we entered into unified command with CAL FIRE. I remained in unified command with CAL FIRE, making sure that our local needs were taken care of, as well as helping address needs throughout the county, which went seamlessly. For a team that doesn't participate regularly in Tulare County, things went really well. Another testament to the strength of command is the command within the city. The EOC not regularly being opened went seamless. That's a testament to the directors, the leadership of the city manager. We had the EOC up and running, ran seamlessly, and things went as well as we would have hoped. So that really consumed us for the month of March. Some of the anomalies that we addressed within our budget, Measure H and Measure I, specifically Measure H, was the overtime budget and a increase to the cost of overtime, not the increase in the cost, but the increase of overtime that we accrued through Measure H. Some of that is directly related to the flood fight, and we are addressing those. Those are going to be reimbursed through the flood fight efforts through FEMA reimbursement. So there's about $40,000 that we identified within the budget that are costs that will hopefully be moved out of that area. Majority of my budget, Measure H, is salary and benefits. A small portion is the maintenance and operation, the cost of goods, that is within my control. A lot of the overtime, the salaries and benefits are outside of my control. Within the fire department, we have constant staffing. When we have a firefighter go out with injury or out on vacation, sick leave, whatever it is, we replace that with another firefighter, another body, which can accrue overtime and increase our costs. So that's some of the highlights that I went over with Sean. There was some small items that he asked about that I was able to clarify. No big ticket items that were of concern, but we went through both the line items of Measure H and Measure I. Some of the additional highlights from some of our previous spending with Measure H funds and Measure I funds was the bleeding control and CPR dummies. I think you guys had a chance to see those at the last meeting at Fire Station 73. We recently, in a joint effort with the police department, did a active shooter and bleeding control training for city staff. And we utilized the bleeding control kits that we purchased with funds from Measure H and Measure I, and we're able to train a large number of the employees that are within the city, specifically City Hall, but also across other departments as well. Overall, the maintenance and operation, we've seen a steady increase as we were speaking about, you were speaking about with the police chief, with the tools and equipment, firefighting equipment. We've seen a minimum of a 25% increase in the cost of firefighting equipment. Some costs are as much as 40% increase, and we're dealing with that and addressing that within our budget as well. Give you an example, I recently purchased 2 sets of turnouts, right? Turnout coat, turnout pants for a firefighter, $7,000 for 2 sets of turnouts, which is 2 sets is crucial because of the carcinogens that we face within the fires. We have 2 sets, so one is always clean, ready to go. After a fire, the other one is then put into the extractor, then cleaned, and then becomes the backup set. So a minimum of 2 sets per firefighters. So that's just an example of some of the increases we have experienced. Other than that, if Sean didn't have any other highlights for you, that's a brief summary of what we talked about, but I'm available for questions as needed.
You talked a little bit about the overtime. That was kind of the synopsis. When you say, $7,000 for turnout, tops and bottoms, is that per set of tops and bottoms, or is that?
That was for 2 sets. So about $3,500 per set is what we're experiencing.
Is that a typical cost, or is that up quite a bit?
Previously, we could purchase 2 sets for around $5,000. So whatever the 40% increase is probably roughly what that is. And that's across the board with firefighting equipment, and not just limited to the fire department. I'm sure that the other directors are experiencing the same thing.
Questions? Very good. Thank you very much.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
So next we'll go to the library. And Margaret, would you like to? Donnie?
I have the state of it, but it's not good news. But We deal with the property manager, I should say there, who's been very unresponsive for now going on over a year. So he's our point of contact, and sometimes he doesn't get back, and sometimes he does and says he's looking into it. So we're doing what we can, but unfortunately, it's on him to get that done. We just can't, the city just can't go in there and do it. It's not our, so hopefully we'll have better news at some point. We're still trying, but as of now, it'd be great to have a different contact person, but we do not at the moment.
We also talked a lot about the new library. It's actually gonna be built.
Good.
I'm excited about that.
Do you know that any kind of time frame? Any kind of time frame? When do you think it might be built? Okay. It's kind of what I thought. All right. Vicki,
The video.
oh, the video.
The video.
Yeah.
Okay, so who's on video? Did I miss somebody in it being announced? I wanted to say hello to them. Oh, okay. All right. Okay, gotcha. So yes, staff is very excited to get summer activities ramped up, and as you know, we opened July 1st last year, so we were not too sure how the smaller facility was going to perform for us holding programs, so we downscaled our programming last summer. It doesn't mean that the community did not have a good time last summer, but now, if you got your water bill, you saw activities that are happening Monday through Sunday, starting June to July. So I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Do you have a time frame for the building of the library?
The architects were just interviewed on Monday, and then I believe council is going to approve hopefully a contract on their first meeting of June, and then the vendor will have a big period of time to really get into design, and then after design is accepted, of course, getting a bid out for construction. So I think we're talking roughly, yeah.
Okay. All right.
Oh, and I'm sorry, I just wanted to correct, our budget will not be, we will not expend all of Measure H funds, but we're at 49% right now, and I foresee us again this year coming in under budget as well, as operations are just downscaled a little bit, and we don't have a lot of room for storage, as you know, so. And so programs take storage room, you need to put your stuff and supplies in storage, so. So that, I just wanted to correct that, so we'll be coming in under, but I don't know what that is at this moment, so. Okay.
Very good. Thank you. And then next is streets.
Yeah, I had a quick conversation with Mike after looking over the numbers. There wasn't anything that particularly jumped out at me. Obviously, we've seen some cost increase for regular maintenance and regular things that get used up on a continued basis, but nothing extreme. Projects seem to be running along on time and as scheduled, so that was pretty much all we had for report.
Don, would you like, or Mike, would you like to comment?
Much like the conversation that was already shared, just to provide some status update, we have acquired a few more staff members for the self-performed maintenance. Vacancies were available. Still struggling to get the equipment that has been budgeted for the Measure I. Vehicles are limited, so still working to get those on order. AC paving for this year is coming to a close. The last remaining section will be on Morton Avenue from the railroad tracks, the old railroad tracks there to the stoplight at D Street. So you'll see that happening, should be about the second or third week of June, and that would conclude this year's hot mix program. Also wrapping up the cold mix operations and identifying streets for the next fiscal year budget, which will come back for you guys to review. Just for a status update on some of the projects, the Grand Avenue, 4th and Henrihan design is in between 80 to 90% complete, working on the remaining details there. The Montgomery J Street is at 90%. The PD evidence storage has been completed. The Union Avenue project is a little greater than 80%. It was at 90%, finding some deficiencies there and some missing infrastructure, causing a little bit of rework to that, so took a step back to about 80%. The Villa Street reconstruction is coming to council on June 6th to review the bids and potentially award the project. So we'll be moving forward with that. Happy to answer any questions the committee may have.
You have Newcomb between Henderson and Morton on the list at all?
So Newcomb is getting ready to finalize the documentation to go out to bid in between Olive and the Porter Slough. So we say Morton to Olive. That is getting ready to go out. The next year's self-performed maintenance has identified the section from Porter Slough to Henderson, as we've had some unraveling there with the impacts from the storm. So we'll be looking to mitigate those areas.
There was a councilman put something out on social media, I think yesterday or the day before, had something to do with Main Street. Is there an update on Main Street project?
That would be Javier, and they are going to design or are finishing up the design of those sections, and then there's a timing by section to implement that project, but that's coming to council as well.
Okay. Very good. Any other questions?
But along Main Street, also, city staff will be working on some self-performed maintenance from Henderson north to Westfield. So there'll be some work there done by city staff.
Very good. Questions? Anybody?
Thank you.
Thank you. So with that being covered, is there any further discussion? That being said, is there a motion to approve?
I'll motion.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Those in favor? Aye. Those opposed? Passes. Our next meeting will need to coincide with the approval process. I'm sorry. John, did you want to get up and say anything?
We have something else first. We had an item tabled from the previous meeting
Okay.
under action, scheduled matters, 1, action. There was, on your previous agenda, there was reorganization
Right.
committee.
When we started that out, I touched on that. Because we're short 2 committee members,
Okay.
I want to postpone it one more time. And then we'll make that
We need to
change.
get that.
At the, absolutely. I know you're wanting this gavel, so we'll make that happen here real quick.
No.
You did fine last time.
That was,
You wouldn't let me use my gun as a gavel.
anyway, John, is there anything you'd like to add to the meeting?
Well, I think the directors did a great job in terms of presenting kind of the different activities that they're in the throes of. We did have our priority projects and city council goals and objectives study session this past Tuesday, and especially in roads, probably 25 million in estimated construction this coming fiscal year. Main Street, as you spoke about, the first section of that will go to reconstruction between Morton and Putnam, and it's a very truncated timeframe that's allowed because we need to be out before the Veterans Day Parade. So the construction seasons of Main Street are going to be very, very brief because essentially you have after the Cinco de Mayo Parade and before Veterans Day Parade. And they're going to work block by block instead of having a complete segment in construction, so that the impacts are mitigated to the different businesses that are located along that. So, and we'll certainly be out before the holiday timeframe, and even before that, given before Veterans Day, and there had been, especially from business owners, talking about the impacts, making sure it's not during the holiday season. That's 50% of most sales occur in the November, December timeframe. So a lot of activity, like I said, on streets. Spoke about Newcomb and improvements there. Villa is also, and you're going to be seeing these coming back to council. It is a recurring theme. I just spent all day up in Three Rivers with the county and Caltrans and all the other cities. Just costs are escalating. And so it anticipated, as you heard Chief Cogburn say, it's just not in equipment. It's in all things that costs are going up. And so probably looking at Villa reconstruction, which is between Olive and Henderson, probably being about $12 million. And that doesn't count the slough. That will be a separate project, probably at about $1 million in a box culvert to address that. So, but those are all projects, and fortunate to have Measure I to be able to backstop some of these cost increases. And be able to, as we're continuing to work through our budget development for next year, looking to put additional funds into the local maintenance, and Mr. Knight and his crews that are intermittently doing cold mix overlays as well as the hot mix overlays on our arterials and collectors. Cold mix for neighborhood residential streets. So looking at about $2 million in that activity just next year. So, and do appreciate, as you heard spoken, the month of March, we essentially lost a month which came right just at our budget development time where, and as Chief Costello said, we were in a 24-hour operational periods. And we continue to still deal with that. The question was about the armory. 10 to 15, there's a family of 5 that is staying there. It's a husband and wife and 3 kids from Springville who lost their home and still don't have, so we're trying to connect them through FEMA to get them housing, but it's just not those that are displaced from the river, it's also those that lost their homes in the March storm events. So,
Is there anything that you can do with our road construction to make it difficult for Todd Construction to ever get a contract again?
Well, there is a process for that. There is a process. It's called, and their colleagues make that determination.
They're very difficult people to deal with. Yeah. Very inconsiderate.
Very good.
Gosh, there was something else I did want to say. But I just want to say thanks again for the time this evening, and that we are on track to continue to work on a budget, be presented to the council. And what we're looking at, just for looking at the closing of the fiscal year, current fiscal year, and having that end-of-year reports, and especially the quarter of April through June. And then also coming with the preliminary budget, looking at meeting, I think third week or so of August. And so being able to look at preliminary fiscal year end as well as what the preliminary budget would be before going to council with that in September.
Okay. Any questions for John?
And I just want to say, every chance I get, to thank the extraordinary work done by Mike Knight's crew, and just great coordination between police, fire, and public works, and parks as well in terms of logistics. Just a lot of moving parts. I was in Phoenix with my son at spring training, seeing the Dodgers and things of that nature, and came back home. And when I walked into the EOC at 3 in the morning, having got back, it actually took a time for me to find my place where it was, because it was working so well. And that was really, I really want to appreciate the expertise that Chief Cogburn and Chief Costello and Mike Knight have in terms, and Maria Bemis, and just how well that worked. And it really speaks to the team and the commitment that they had. And a number of folks didn't sleep for 3 days or so. They just worked 24 hours consistently. It became a little bit of a contest, but yeah, I think Mike Knight won, closely followed by Brian Cogburn. But just to appreciate their dedication and support, and the flood fight, as you hear us called. Those are names. When you hear us saying that, that's because that's the nomenclature we have to use with FEMA when we're differentiating these costs and pursuing reimbursement, which is about 75% federal FEMA. We try to get to 100%. That remaining 25% is split between local and state, and we really try to get that state 25% remaining, but probably safe to assume we're something less than 10% at the local share. But I know that we're in the hundreds of thousands of dollars of mostly personnel, but we also had emergency acquisition of equipment and other types of things to ensure that we didn't lose one home. Not one home was affected, suffered any damage, and just extraordinary things that happened to avoid that.
That's really good, very good. The, and I'm sure I can speak on behalf of the board, we appreciate all the effort that's been put in. You know, a large part of this is never seen. It's all done behind the scenes. And so, you know, all the sleepless nights you put in, all the planning, all the lives you saved, all the property and peace you kept, on behalf of the board, we thank you for it. Our next meeting is the week of, the third week, is would be on the 24th. It's on a Thursday. How does that look for the committee? August 24th. That sound good?
Yeah.
Ladies, okay. All right. Time would be 5:30. I'm assuming we'll probably meet here again and have our meeting here. There's going to be a few more things we're going to do at this meeting, so I want to have this environment to work in. So is there anything else for the good of the order here? Very good. Thank you very much. We're adjourned.